Let's start this story with a little bit of thunder. Listen to that. Can you hear that? That's the sound of a glacier calving into the sea. The sound of a giant crack as the ice breaks apart. The sound of rivers of melted ice pouring into the ocean. And these are not just background noises in some faraway frozen land. These sounds are our future. They're a warning from the poles of our planet. They're retelling us that Earth's ice caps are melting faster than they have in the recorded history of our planet. You see, all around the world, ice is disappearing. Glaciers the size of cities are melting every single day. At the North Pole, vast ice sheets are crumbling into the sea. In Antarctica, entire shelves of ice, some as big as Los Angeles, are collapsing. And as this happens, the Arctic and the Antarctic are pouring out their ancient secrets. Viruses that were locked in ice for thousands of years are now being unleashed. Woolly mammoths and other animals that have been frozen for centuries are now being thawed out. And in the shifting sands of the melting ice caps, archaeologists are finding the remains of a lost human civilization. In this episode of Gravitas Plus, we'll tell you, why is this happening? What does it mean for the planet and for us humans? Let me introduce you to an unlikely hero of this story. This is Jason Box. He is an expert on Arctic ice and climate change. Take a look at what he tweeted recently. It shows two satellite images, one from 1990, the other from 2020. See the difference? The white patches show where the glaciers were. In 3 decades, they shrank by a massive 3,000 square kilometers. That's almost 20 American football fields. And this is just one part of the Arctic. This is happening across the globe. As the ice melts, the world is losing its cold, fresh water input. The top layer of ice in the Arctic Ocean used to act like a giant mirror. It reflected the sun's rays back into space, keeping Earth cool. But now that mirror is cracking. Dark ocean water is taking its place. Dark water absorbs heat, and this is causing the planet to warm up. And as the planet warms up, more ice melts and more dark water is revealed, and the cycle continues. Let me show you the numbers. Since the 1970s, we've lost nearly half of the glaciers in the Arctic. Today, we're losing 2% of the Arctic ice cover every decade. By 2100, most of the glaciers in the Arctic could disappear. And here's what that means for us. 80% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of a coast. If the ice keeps melting at this rate, 1 in 6 people living in coastal cities will be at risk. 1 in 6. The small island nations of the Pacific and Indian Ocean will be submerged. Cities like Mumbai, Shanghai, London, New York, they will all be partly underwater. Now, let's move south to the Antarctic. Here, the situation is even worse. Here, the ice is melting 5 times faster than it did in the 1980s. As the ice melts, it's releasing methane gas. Now, methane is a potent greenhouse gas. It's 25 times more powerful than carbon dioxide at trapping heat. So as the ice melts, more and more methane is released. And this is accelerating climate change. And yet, we haven't even factored in the most important thing about the melting ice. The most important thing for the residents of the Arctic. You see, glaciers aren't just a source of fresh water. For communities in Alaska, in Greenland, and in the Himalayas, glaciers are also a source of drinking water. They feed the rivers that these communities depend on. But as the glaciers melt, these rivers are drying up. Communities are being displaced, forced to leave their homes in search of water and a better life. The next time you see a picture of polar bears on social media, remember this: they're not cute, cuddly toys. Polar bears depend on ice. They use it to hunt for fish and seals. They travel on it. They raise their young on it. But as the ice disappears, so do their hunting grounds. Seals, too, are losing their habitat. Their populations have shrunk by 30% in the last few decades. Penguins are washing up on the shores of South Africa, completely exhausted, because they've been swimming long distances to find food and they can't find any. All of this has a domino effect on the entire ecosystem. Scientists have been racing against time to study the ice, to measure its thickness, to warn us about what's happening. Meet Dr. Jonathan Over, an ocean scientist. He was part of a team that recently conducted the first ever comprehensive survey of the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica. They found that the glacier is retreating rapidly. Parts have retreated by 2 kilometers since the year 2000. And here's what's scary. Scientists say that the Thwaites Glacier could collapse entirely within the next 300 years. And if that happens, it could raise sea levels by around 2 meters. As we speak, the world's best scientists are working overtime to understand the ice, to understand the feedback loops that accelerate climate change. They're studying how the ice affects ocean currents, how it influences weather patterns, how it regulates the climate. Because as the ice melts, all of this will change. Next time you see pictures of glacial lakes, don't just admire their beauty. Remember, they're a recent addition to the landscape. These lakes were formed after glaciers retreated. They carved through the earth. They left behind huge gouges of rock and debris. Then water filled these holes and created these beautiful lakes. Lakes that will eventually evaporate, leaving behind salty deposits of minerals. Deposits that could change the chemistry of the soil around them forever. We're standing at the edge of a precipice today. We know what needs to be done. We need to stop burning fossil fuels, invest in green energy, change the way we farm and produce goods. We need to hold polluters accountable, demand climate action from our leaders. But are we doing enough? Are our leaders doing enough? You decide. Today, young people are marching on the streets. They're calling out the big polluters, demanding action from our governments. They say, there is no planet B. Do we listen to them, or do we dismiss them as misguided kids? Will we continue to ignore the science, or will we hold world leaders accountable? Will we demand change, or will we sit and watch the ice melt away?